The conference room fell silent as Hyun activated the holographic display. She had been working on this project for 3 months, and today she would finally present her findings to the Galactic Linguistic Council. The room was packed with representatives from dozens of different species, each one eager to see what she had discovered. The hologram flickered to life, showing a series of strange symbols that floated in the air like ghostly letters. They were beautiful in their own way, with smooth curves and sharp angles that seemed to follow some kind of pattern. But nobody in the room could understand what they meant. Hyun began her presentation. She explained how her team had found an ancient ship drifting in the outer rim of the galaxy. The ship was old, incredibly old. Their tests showed it was more than 10,000 years old, which made it older than most of the civilizations currently living in the galaxy. Inside the ship, they had found a data crystal. It was the only thing that still worked after all those years. When they managed to access the crystal, they discovered it contained a massive database of information. But there was a problem. Everything in the database was written in a language that nobody recognized. For 3 months, Hyun and her team had tried everything. They used every decoding method known to the galactic community. They compared the symbols to thousands of different languages from hundreds of different worlds. They even tried using quantum computers to find patterns that organic minds might miss. Nothing worked. The symbols remained a mystery. Mira, one of the junior researchers on the team, stood next to Hyun. She was young and enthusiastic, always ready with new ideas. She had been the one who suggested they should bring in experts from other fields, not just linguistics. Maybe an archaeologist or a mathematician could see something they had missed. Talon, a reptilian scholar from the Vexar species, was sitting in the front row. He had been studying ancient languages for over 40 years. He leaned forward, studying the symbols with his large, intelligent eyes. Even he had to admit that he had never seen anything like this before. The symbols appeared on the screen in vertical columns. Each symbol was complex but also strangely organized. There was a mathematical precision to them, but also something artistic. It was as if whoever created this language wanted it to be both logical and beautiful at the same time. Hyun continued her presentation, showing different examples of the symbols. Some appeared to be simple, possibly representing basic sounds or letters. Others were more complex, maybe representing whole words or ideas. But without a key, without some way to understand the basic building blocks of the language, they were stuck. The council members whispered among themselves. Some suggested that the language might be from a civilization that had gone extinct long ago. Others wondered if it might be from a species that lived in a completely different part of the galaxy, somewhere they had never explored. A few even suggested it might not be a language at all, but some kind of code or mathematical formula. At the back of the room, June stood quietly. He was the human representative to the Galactic Linguistic Council, a position he had only held for a few weeks. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 200 years ago, which was practically yesterday compared to species like the Vexar or the Taquan. Most of the older species viewed humans as competent enough, but nothing special. They were good at some things like art and storytelling, but they were not considered to be particularly gifted when it came to science or linguistics. June was there mostly as a formality to observe and learn, not to contribute. But as Hyun displayed the next sequence of symbols on the screen, something happened to June. His face went pale. His eyes grew wide. He took a step forward almost unconsciously, as if drawn toward the holographic display. Hyun noticed his movement. She paused in the middle of her sentence and looked at him. Several other council members turned to see what had caught her attention. "Is something wrong?" Hyun asked. June did not answer immediately. He was staring at the symbols with an expression that was difficult to read. It was somewhere between shock and disbelief, with maybe a touch of fear mixed in. "Can you show the second sequence again?" June asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hyun exchanged a glance with Mira, then complied. She switched the hologram back to the previous set of symbols. June took another step forward, then another. Now he was standing right in front of the holographic display, so close that the light from the symbols played across his face. "That's Korean," June said. The room erupted into confused murmurs. Several council members turned to their neighbors asking what Korean was. Others simply looked puzzled. "I'm sorry, what?" Hyun asked. June turned to face her. His hands were shaking slightly. That's Korean. It's a human language. More specifically, it's Hangul, the writing system we use for Korean. These symbols right here. He pointed at several characters in the hologram. These are letters. This one is G, which makes a G or K sound. This one is A, which makes an A sound. Together they make Ga or Ka. Talon stood up from his seat. That's impossible. This ship is 10,000 years old. Your species only achieved spaceflight 200 years ago. You didn't even have written language 10,000 years ago. I know, June said quietly. I know it doesn't make sense, but I'm telling you, that's Korean. I can read it. Hyun quickly pulled up her datapad and began searching through the galactic database. She found information about human languages and specifically about Korean and Hangul. She pulled up examples and threw them onto the holographic display next to the ancient symbols. The room fell completely silent. The match was nearly perfect. The ancient symbols and the modern human writing system were almost identical. There were tiny differences here and there, small variations in style, but the core structure was exactly the same. Mira ran a computer analysis, overlaying the two sets of symbols. The computer calculated a 98.7% match. That was far too close to be a coincidence. This is impossible, Talon repeated, but his voice was softer now, filled with wonder instead of disbelief. Hyun turned to June. Can you read it? Can you translate what it says? June looked at the symbols for a long moment. Then he began to read aloud, translating the ancient text into galactic common so everyone could understand. We sailed beyond the edge of our world, seeking those who came before. We carry the memories of our ancestors, their songs, their sorrows, their hope. The silence in the room was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all simply stared at the impossible text written in a human language that should not have existed 10,000 years ago. Finally, one of the council members asked the question that everyone was thinking. Are you suggesting that humans created this? June looked at the ancient text, at the words written in his native language by people who had died thousands of years before his ancestors had learned to farm. I don't know, he said honestly, but whoever wrote this, they wrote it in Korean, and I can read every single word. The emergency session of the Galactic Linguistic Council lasted well into the night cycle of the station. After June's shocking revelation, nobody wanted to leave. The discovery was too important, too impossible to ignore. If what June claimed was true, it would change everything they thought they knew about galactic history. Hyun had called for a full analysis of the situation. She brought in her entire research team, along with specialists in archaeology, anthropology, and even quantum physics. If they were going to prove that this ancient text was written in a human language, they needed to be absolutely certain. The implications were too massive to allow for any mistakes. Talon insisted on running his own tests. He was not trying to prove June wrong exactly, but he needed to see the evidence for himself. The idea that humans had existed 10,000 years ago, that they had achieved space travel before his own ancient species, was difficult to accept. The Vexar had records going back 8,000 years, and in none of those records was there any mention of humans. June sat at a terminal, working with Mira to compare the ancient symbols with modern Korean writing. They pulled up examples from different time periods in human history, showing how the Korean alphabet had changed over the centuries. What they found was fascinating. The ancient text from the ship used a form of Korean that was more classical, more formal than what people used in everyday conversation in modern times. It was similar to the Korean that had been used on Earth hundreds of years ago, before the language had evolved and simplified. But the basic structure was the same. The alphabet was the same. How is this possible? Mira asked, studying the comparisons on her screen. Languages change over time. They evolve. But this is too similar. It's like someone took modern Korean and only changed it a little bit. June shook his head. I don't know. But Korean is special in one way. Most languages on Earth evolved naturally over thousands of years, changing slowly as people use them. But Hangul, the Korean alphabet, was actually invented. Created on purpose. What do you mean, invented? Mira asked. In the year 1443 by the old Earth calendar, a Korean king named Sejong the Great created Hangul. He wanted a writing system that was logical and easy to learn, so that common people could read and write. Before that, Koreans used Chinese characters which were very difficult. Sejong designed Hangul to be simple and efficient. Talon had been listening to this conversation. He approached their terminal with a thoughtful expression on his scaled face. So you're saying this writing system has a known inventor? It did not evolve naturally? That's correct, June confirmed. Sejong designed it based on scientific principles. The shapes of the letters are based on the shape your mouth makes when you produce those sounds. It's one of the most logical writing systems ever created. That might explain why it survived so long, Hyun said, joining their conversation. She had been running calculations on her datapad. If the writing system was designed to be efficient and logical, it might have been more resistant to change over time. It was already optimized, so there was less pressure for it to evolve. But that still doesn't explain how it existed 10,000 years ago, Talon pointed out. According to human historical records, Sejong created this alphabet about 600 years ago. Not 10,000 years ago. Nobody had an answer to that. Hyun pulled up more of the ancient text on the main display. June, can you translate more of it? Maybe the text itself will give us answers. June stood and approached the holographic display. He read through the symbols carefully, translating as he went. The council members gathered around to listen. This section appears to be a log entry, June began. It says day 847 of the voyage. We have traveled farther than any of our people before us. The home star is no longer visible even with our strongest instruments. We are truly alone in the darkness between stars, but we do not despair. We carry with us the knowledge of our ancestors, preserved in the old language, the language that Sejong gifted to our people so that none would be denied the power of written words. June stopped reading. His voice had caught in his throat. The room was absolutely silent. They mentioned Sejong, Mira whispered. They knew about Sejong. Keep reading, Hyun urged gently. June continued. The entry goes on. We know we may never reach our destination. The journey is long and the void is vast, but we document everything in Hangul, the perfect alphabet, so that if anyone finds these records, they will be able to read our story. Sejong designed this writing to last forever, and now it will carry our legacy across the stars. Talon's eyes widened. They're talking about the writing system like it's ancient to them. Like Sejong lived long before they were born. How long before? One of the other council members asked. June scrolled through more of the text. There's a date here. It says, this log entry was written in the year 8247 by their calendar, and they mention that Sejong created Hangul in their year 1443. That means... He did the math in his head. That means 6,804 years had passed between the creation of Hangul and when they wrote this log. But that would mean Hangul was created 16 or 17,000 years ago, Mira said, her voice filled with disbelief. That's impossible. Humans didn't even exist as a modern species back then. Not these humans, Hyun said slowly. Not the humans we know today. But maybe other humans. Earlier humans. First humans. The idea hung in the air like a physical thing. Everyone in the room understood what Hyun was suggesting, but nobody wanted to say it out loud because it sounded too crazy. Talon finally spoke. You're suggesting that humans evolved twice, that there was a first human civilization that rose, achieved space travel, and then somehow disappeared, and then humans evolved again on Earth, becoming the species we know today. I'm not suggesting anything, Hyun said. I'm just trying to make sense of impossible data. June found another section of text and began reading it aloud without being asked. His voice was soft, almost reverent. This is a personal log. It says, My name is Sora. I'm a botanist on this ship. Today I taught my daughter to write her name in Hangul. She is only 5 years old, but she already knows 20 letters. Sejong truly was wise to make the alphabet so simple that even children can learn it easily. I think about my own grandmother, who taught me to write when I was young. She used to say that every letter we write is a gift from Sejong to all future generations. Now my daughter carries that gift into the stars. I wonder if she will teach her own children someday, on whatever world we finally call home. June had to stop again. There were tears in his eyes. Mira put a hand on his shoulder. She sounds so human, Mira said quietly. The way she writes about her daughter, about her grandmother. These aren't aliens. These are humans. They think like humans. They feel like humans, because they are humans, June said. They are us. Or we are them. I don't know which is true anymore. Hyun was pulling up more data on her pad. There's more in this database, much more. There are thousands of log entries. Technical specifications, cultural records, even recipes and songs. If June can read all of it, I can, June said firmly. Give me time and I can translate everything. Talon looked at the ancient text with new understanding. These people, whoever they were, they wanted to be remembered. They documented everything in a language they knew would last. They were sending a message across time. A message that took 10,000 years to arrive, Hyun added. And by pure chance, we found someone who could read it. Not pure chance, one of the other council members said. June is here because humans are part of the galactic community now. These ancient humans sent their message in a bottle across the ocean of time, and it finally reached the shore when their descendants returned to the stars. June looked at all the text still waiting to be translated, thousands of log entries, thousands of stories, all written by people who had been dead for 10 millennia, people who somehow shared his language and his culture. We need to know what happened to them, June said. We need to know where they went, why they left, and what became of their civilization. The answers are in here somewhere, Hyun nodded. Then we keep translating. All of it, every word. These people wanted their story told, and after 10,000 years we're finally going to hear it. 3 weeks had passed since June first identified the ancient language as Korean. In that time he had barely slept. He spent every waking hour translating the contents of the database, working alongside Hyun and Mira to piece together the story of these mysterious ancient humans. What they discovered was extraordinary. The database contained the complete records of an expedition called the First Voyage. According to the logs, these people had launched from a planet they called Earth. Though the more June read, the more it became clear that their Earth was not quite the same as his Earth. The earliest logs described a civilization that was advanced far beyond what human archaeologists had ever imagined. These ancient humans had developed fusion power, genetic engineering, and faster-than-light travel thousands of years before June's ancestors had learned to write. But they had not been exploring the galaxy out of curiosity. They had been fleeing. June translated a log entry that made the situation clear. It was written by someone named Dabin, who appeared to be the captain of the ship. We launched today with heavy hearts. The astronomers have confirmed what we feared. The cascade has begun. Within 50 years, perhaps less, a chain reaction of supernovas will sterilize our entire sector of the galaxy. Every world we have ever known, every colony we have established, will be consumed by fire. The First Voyage is humanity's last hope. We carry with us 50,000 souls in cryogenic sleep, along with genetic samples of every species we could save from Earth. Our mission is simple: get far enough away to survive, and rebuild. The room was quiet as June finished reading. Hyun and Mira exchanged glances. Talon, who had become a permanent fixture in their research room, closed his eyes in sympathy. They were refugees, Mira said softly, running from the end of their world. Not just refugees, Hyun corrected. They were survivors. They had the technology and the foresight to see disaster coming and do something about it. How many civilizations could do that? June continued reading through the logs chronologically. The ship had traveled for decades, moving from system to system, searching for a suitable world to colonize. Along the way, they had encountered several primitive species just beginning to develop intelligence. One log entry described a world inhabited by beings that matched the description of the Taquan species. The ancient humans had observed them from orbit, noting their early use of tools and their development of basic language. The log writer, a scientist named Hanuo, had written something that made June's heart skip a beat. We have decided to leave them a gift. We will not make contact directly, as our presence might disrupt their natural development, but we will leave a monument on their moon, carved with basic symbols from Hangul. Perhaps if they ever reach their moon, they will find it and know that they are not alone in the universe. We will teach them the concept of writing, even if they cannot understand the meaning yet. Wait, Talon said, leaning forward. Did you say they visited the Taquan homeworld? According to this log, yes. About 9,800 years ago. Talon immediately activated his communicator and began speaking rapidly in his own language. He was calling someone back on his homeworld. While they waited for Talon to finish his call, June continued translating. The logs painted a picture of a civilization that was both desperate and noble. They were trying to survive, but they also took time to document everything, to leave messages for any species that might one day find their records. Sora, the botanist June had read about before, wrote frequently in her personal logs. She described teaching her daughter about Earth, about the foods they used to eat, about the festivals they used to celebrate. She included recipes, detailed instructions for making kimchi and other traditional Korean dishes, complete with notes about which Earth vegetables could be substituted if the original ingredients were not available. She was preserving culture, Mira observed, not just language or technology, but actual living culture. The things that make a civilization unique. Another log entry, this one written by an engineer named Taeyang, described the technical specifications of the ship. It was powered by an antimatter reactor and could maintain near light speed for decades at a time. The ship was designed to be self-sufficient, with hydroponic gardens, manufacturing facilities, and even schools for the children who would be born during the voyage. They were planning for generations, Hyun noted. They knew the journey would take longer than a single lifetime. Talon ended his call and turned back to the group. His expression was serious. I have just spoken with the High Archivist of my people. I asked him to check our oldest religious texts, the stories that date back to before we had written history, stories that were passed down orally for thousands of years. And, Hyun prompted, there is a legend among my people about the sky teachers, beings who came from above and taught our ancestors about the stars, about writing, about preserving knowledge. We always thought it was just a myth. But the High Archivist has just accessed our most sacred temple, the one built on our moon. There is an artifact there, a stone with symbols carved into it, symbols that no living Taquan has ever been able to read. Can he send us an image of the symbols? June asked. Talon nodded and forwarded the image to the main display. When it appeared, June felt a chill run down his spine. The symbols carved into the stone were Korean characters. They spelled out a simple message. Look up. You are not alone. We were here. Mira covered her mouth with her hand. They really did it. They left messages for the species they encountered. How many other species did they visit? Hyun wondered aloud. How many other civilizations have ancient artifacts with Korean writing on them? June continued to translate, and the story became both more amazing and more tragic. The first voyage had discovered dozens of worlds with primitive life. They documented everything, mapped the stars, and left markers wherever they went. They were creating a record of the galaxy for whoever came after them. But the logs also showed that their situation was becoming desperate. The ship was old and systems were beginning to fail. The cosmic disaster they had fled was spreading faster than predicted. Several other colony ships from the first voyage had gone silent, their signals disappearing from the network. One log entry, written by someone named Hana about 7,000 years ago, was particularly heartbreaking. We have made the difficult decision to consolidate. All remaining first voyage ships are converging on a single system. We have found a world that can support human life with minimal terraforming. It is not Earth, but it could become home. Of the 100 ships that launched, only 7 remain. Of the 5 million souls we carried from Earth, fewer than 200,000 survive. But we endure, we adapt, we remember. June translated more logs describing the consolidation. The surviving humans worked together to build a new civilization on their chosen world. They used all of their remaining technology to establish farms, build cities, and create a stable society. But there were problems. Genetic diversity was limited. Resources were scarce, and the knowledge they had brought from old Earth was slowly being lost as the older generations died, and the younger generations grew up knowing only the new world. The final logs were dated about 7,000 years ago. They were written by a leader named Junho, and his words carried the weight of finality. We have failed to maintain our technological civilization. Our children are growing up without fusion power, without genetic engineering, without the advanced knowledge that our ancestors took for granted. We are becoming a primitive people again. But perhaps that is not failure. Perhaps it is simply change. We have decided on a final project, a last act of hope. We have found a world, a beautiful blue world with vast oceans and a stable sun. It is very similar to old Earth. We will seed it with human DNA, altered to develop naturally over millions of years. If we cannot survive as we are, perhaps we can be reborn. Perhaps, given enough time, humanity will rise again from that world and return to the stars. This time we will do things right. June stopped translating. His hands were shaking. That world, Mira whispered. They're talking about Earth, our Earth. We're not the second attempt, Hyun said, her voice filled with awe. We're the continuation. They made us. They made sure humanity would get another chance. Talon stood up slowly. These ancient humans, they sacrificed everything. Their technology, their civilization, even their own existence, all so that humanity could try again. June looked at the final log entry, the last words written by Junho. We leave this database for whoever finds it. Remember us. Remember that we tried. Remember that we loved, we hoped, and we dreamed of a future we would never see. And if you are human, if you can read these words in the language of Sejong, know that you are our children. You are our legacy. Make us proud. News of the discovery spread across the galactic community like a shockwave. Within days, every major civilization knew about the ancient humans and their impossible legacy. The story was everywhere, on news broadcasts and academic journals, in casual conversations in markets and meeting halls across hundreds of worlds. The reactions were as varied as the species themselves. The Vexar, Talon's people, responded with fascination and respect. They immediately opened their archives and began searching through their oldest records for any other evidence of ancient human contact. Their scholars worked day and night, comparing linguistic patterns and looking for traces of Korean influence in their own language development. The Karathi Empire, a powerful military confederation that controlled dozens of star systems, reacted with suspicion. Their generals and politicians questioned why humanity had hidden this history. They demanded to know if modern humans retained any of the ancient technology, any of the weapons or ships that could pose a threat to galactic peace. Hyun had to issue several public statements explaining that modern humans had known nothing about the first voyage until now. The genetic connection was real, proven by DNA analysis, but there had been no hidden conspiracy, no secret knowledge passed down through the ages. Modern humanity had truly started from scratch. The Pelthine Collective, a hive-minded species that experienced consciousness as a shared phenomenon, found the discovery philosophically profound. They published essays arguing that the first voyage proved that consciousness itself might be cyclical, that intelligence naturally reached for the stars, fell, and rose again in an eternal pattern. But the most dramatic reaction came from the Taquan. 3 days after Talon confirmed that the monument on the Taquan moon contained Korean writing, a delegation of Taquan religious leaders arrived at the research station. They were led by an elderly Taquan named Kelsor, who served as the keeper of ancient ways for their entire species. Kelsor requested a private meeting with June, Hyun, Mira, and Talon. When they gathered in a small conference room, the old Taquan moved slowly, his scaled body showing signs of great age, but his eyes were bright and alert. I have spent my entire life studying the old stories of my people, Kelsor began, speaking in careful galactic common. Stories about the sky teachers who came before writing, before cities, before we knew we were not alone. We preserved these stories in songs and prayers for 8,000 years, not knowing if they were true or merely comforting myths. He activated a holographic display from his personal device. Images appeared showing Taquan children learning to write, Taquan scholars studying ancient texts, Taquan artists creating beautiful calligraphy. Our writing system, Kelsor continued, was always said to be a gift from the sky teachers. We based it on the symbols they left on our moon, though we could never read those symbols themselves. We took their marks and adapted them, created our own letters inspired by their shapes. Every Taquan child learns this history. We write because the sky teachers showed us that knowledge could be preserved. June felt a lump in his throat. My ancestors gave you the concept of writing itself. More than that, Kelsor said softly. They gave us hope. The knowledge that we were not alone in the universe, that there were beings greater than us who had reached the stars. That hope drove us forward. It inspired us to develop science, to build telescopes, to eventually achieve spaceflight ourselves. Everything my people have become, we owe to the ancient humans who visited us 9,000 years ago. Mira wiped tears from her eyes. Hyun placed a hand over her heart in a gesture of respect. Talon bowed his head. There is more, Kelsor said. He displayed another image, this one showing a stone tablet covered in intricate carvings. This is the Tablet of First Light, our most sacred religious artifact. It has been in our most ancient temple for as long as we have kept records. We always knew it was important, but we could never fully translate it. Now I believe we know why. He turned to June. Would you be willing to try translating it? June studied the image carefully. The symbols were worn and weathered, but he could make them out. They were definitely Korean, though written in an archaic style that required careful interpretation. He began to read aloud, translating as he went. To the people of this world, we have watched you from above. We have seen you learn to use tools, to build shelters, to create art. You are at the beginning of a great journey. We leave you this gift, the concept of writing, so that your knowledge will not die with each generation. Learn to preserve your thoughts in symbols, share your stories across time, and know that the stars await you. The room was silent for a long moment. It's beautiful, Mira whispered. Kelsor bowed deeply to June. Thank you. After 8,000 years, we finally understand the full message. Word of the tablet translation spread quickly. Other species began checking their own ancient artifacts and religious texts. The Drethene coalition found references to the soft ones who walked upright in their creation mythology. The Vorlak Ascendancy discovered old cave paintings that clearly depicted bipedal figures that matched human proportions. Each new discovery added another piece to the puzzle. The first voyage humans had not just passed through the galaxy. They had deliberately made contact with dozens of primitive species, leaving messages and monuments that would last for millennia. June found himself becoming famous across the galaxy. He was the human who could read the ancient texts, the bridge between the present and the past. News organizations from hundreds of worlds requested interviews. Universities offered him prestigious positions. Children on alien worlds learned about him in their history classes, but June felt overwhelmed by it all. He was not a hero or a sage. He was just a person who happened to speak Korean. The real heroes were the people of the first voyage, the ones who had sacrificed everything to give humanity and countless other species a chance at survival. Hyun organized a conference where representatives from 50 different species gathered to share their findings about ancient human contact. The evidence was overwhelming. The first voyage had visited nearly every major civilization that was now part of the galactic community during their primitive stages. They were the precursors, one scholar declared. The first civilization in our galaxy to achieve advanced spaceflight. They were the elders, and we are all their children in a way. A representative from the Pelthene Collective raised an interesting question. If the ancient humans seeded Earth with human DNA 7,000 years ago, and modern humans evolved to sentience only recently, does that mean the timeline matches with natural evolution? Hyun had already researched this. According to Earth's geological and archaeological records, modern humans developed surprisingly quickly. There are gaps in the evolutionary record that scientists have always found puzzling. Now we know why. The first voyage accelerated the process. They gave Earth a head start. Talon added his own observation. They did not just want humans to survive. They wanted to ensure that Korean language and culture survived. That is why they encoded it into the DNA templates, into the cultural memory somehow. When modern humans on Earth independently developed language, Korean emerged naturally. Not naturally, June corrected gently. King Sejong created Hangul? That's historical fact. But perhaps Sejong was inspired by something deeper, Mira suggested. Perhaps the ancient humans left more than DNA. Perhaps they left ideas, cultural memories that bubbled up through the generations. Sejong thought he was inventing Hangul, but maybe he was remembering it. It was an unprovable theory, but it captured the imagination of the galactic community. The idea that the first voyage humans had been so determined to preserve their language that they had somehow embedded it in the genetic or cultural memory of their descendants was both romantic and terrifying in its implications. June stood before the assembly of galactic representatives and made a statement that would be quoted in history, books for generations to come. My people were once great. We sailed the stars before most of you had discovered fire. We made first contact with dozens of species and taught them about writing, about preserving knowledge, about reaching for the sky. We fell from that greatness, lost everything we had built, and had to start over from nothing. But we came back. Humanity returned to the stars. And now we know that we are not newcomers to the galactic community. We are returnees. We are coming home to a galaxy our ancestors helped shape. I hope we can live up to their legacy. The chamber erupted in applause, not just polite acknowledgement, but genuine enthusiasm. For the first time, humans were not seen as the young upstarts or the primitive newcomers. They were recognized as the descendants of the elders, worthy of respect. But June knew that respect came with responsibility. Humanity would now be watched closely, judged by the standards of their ancient ancestors. They would have to prove that they deserved the legacy that had been left to them. 6 months after the initial discovery, the Galactic Council approved a joint expedition to follow the star charts found in the ancient database. The mission had 3 goals: find physical evidence of first voyage settlements, recover any additional artifacts or records, and map the full extent of ancient human influence across the galaxy. June was appointed as the chief translator and cultural liaison for the expedition. Hyun served as the scientific director, while Mira led the archaeological team. Talon insisted on joining as well, arguing that his people had a personal connection to the first voyage through the monument on their moon. The council agreed, and soon they had assembled a team of specialists from 20 different species. The expedition ship was named Sejong's Gift in honor of the man who had created the alphabet that allowed them to unlock the ancient records. It was a state-of-the-art research vessel equipped with the latest scanning, technology and archaeological equipment. Their first destination was a system marked on the ancient star charts as New Haven. According to the logs, this had been one of the first colony attempts by the first voyage. The settlement had lasted for 3 generations before being abandoned due to resource shortages. When they arrived at the system, sensors immediately detected artificial structures on the 3rd planet. The team could barely contain their excitement as they prepared landing shuttles. The ruins were extensive. An entire city spread across a valley, its buildings weathered by 7,000 years of wind and rain, but still recognizable as human construction. The architecture was elegant and practical, with curved roofs that reminded June of traditional Korean design, mixed with obviously futuristic elements. Mira led the archaeological team through the ruins, carefully documenting everything. They found homes with intact furniture, schools with teaching materials still scattered on desks, and even a library with thousands of physical books preserved in a climate-controlled vault. The books were all written in Korean. June spent days in that library, carefully scanning and translating texts. There were histories, scientific treatises, novels, poetry collections, and children's books. An entire civilization's worth of knowledge preserved in writing that he could read as easily as a modern newspaper. One book in particular caught his attention. It was a journal written by a teacher named Bora. She described daily life in the colony, the struggles and triumphs of building a new world. Her final entry was dated just before the colony was evacuated. "We failed to make this world our home, but we did not fail to live. We built houses and filled them with laughter. We planted gardens and watched them grow. We taught our children to read and write in the language of our ancestors. When future humans find this place, they will know that we tried. They will know that we carried the light of civilization across the darkness. And perhaps that knowledge will inspire them to try again, to do better than we did. That is my hope as I lock these doors for the last time." June read Bora's words aloud to the team. Even the alien species members seemed moved by her sentiment. Hope, it seemed, was a universal emotion. They found 2 more settlement sites over the next month. Each told a similar story of brave attempts to colonize new worlds, of communities that lasted decades or even centuries before ultimately failing. But none of the failures were complete disasters. Each settlement had been carefully documented, its knowledge preserved for whoever might come after. The team also investigated several worlds where the first voyage had encountered primitive alien species. On each world, they found monuments or markers with Korean inscriptions. Some were simple messages of greeting. Others were more complex, offering basic information about mathematics, astronomy, or agriculture. One monument on the homeworld of the Drethene Coalition was particularly impressive. It was a massive stone structure that functioned as a star map, showing the positions of nearby stars and marking which ones had planets suitable for life. Carved into the base were instructions in Korean explaining how to read the map. They were teaching navigation to species that had not even invented the wheel yet, Hyun marveled. They were planting seeds of knowledge that would take thousands of years to grow, but the most important discovery came when they followed the star charts to the final destination, the world, where the last survivors of the first voyage had settled. The planet was beautiful. Green continents surrounded by blue oceans, white clouds drifting across a familiar-looking sky. Scans showed abundant plant and animal life, but no signs of current habitation. They landed near what the ancient charts indicated had been the main settlement. What they found took their breath away. A city carved into the side of a mountain, its buildings built to last for millennia. Unlike the other settlements they had found, this one showed signs of having been occupied for much longer. There were multiple layers of construction, evidence of technological decline visible in how the buildings changed over time. The oldest structures used advanced materials and designs. The newer buildings were simpler, made from stone and wood. At the center of the city was a monument. It was a tall obelisk covered in Korean writing, well preserved despite thousands of years of exposure to the elements. The inscription was long and detailed. June translated it for the team, his voice growing more emotional as he read. "We are the last of the first voyage. Our ships are silent. Our technology is fading, but we do not mourn what we have lost. We celebrate what we have preserved. We have kept alive the knowledge of writing, the stories of our ancestors, the memory of Earth. We have passed these gifts to our children, and they will pass them to their children for as many generations as we endure. But we know we cannot endure forever. Our numbers are too few, our genetic diversity too limited, so we have made a choice. We have found a world that reminds us of Earth. We will seed it with our DNA, carefully designed to develop naturally over millions of years. We do this not in desperation but in hope. Hope that humanity will rise again. Hope that our descendants will return to the stars. Hope that someone will find these records and know that we existed, that we loved, that we tried. To whoever reads this, remember us. Remember that humanity's first journey into the stars was not made by conquerors or explorers, but by refugees who refused to let their species die. Remember that we carried with us the language of Sejong, the culture of Korea, the memories of Earth, and if you are human, if our genetic legacy has brought you back to the stars, know this. You are not the beginning. You are the continuation. Make us proud. Finish the journey we started. The obelisk was signed with dozens of names, the last survivors of the first voyage, all adding their names to this final monument. The last name on the list was Junho, the leader whose logs June had translated months ago. Mira discovered something else near the base of the monument. It was a vault, sealed with a door that had a simple lock. The lock had Korean instructions carved into it. Open this when humanity returns. With trembling hands, June opened the vault. Inside were thousands of data crystals, carefully preserved and labeled. They contained the complete genetic database used to seed Earth, along with detailed records of every aspect of first voyage culture, technology, and history. There were also personal items, photographs from old Earth showing cities and landscapes that no longer existed, musical instruments, art pieces, a sealed container that, when opened, released the preserved seeds of Korean plants that had gone extinct on Earth millennia ago. At the very bottom of the vault was a simple letter, written on actual paper, in Korean. It was addressed, "To the humans who return." June read it aloud, tears streaming down his face. "Hello. If you are reading this, our plan worked. You exist. You have returned to the stars. You can read Hangul, which means the language survived even though we did not. We do not know how long it has been. We do not know what your Earth looks like or what civilization you have built, but we know you made it. That is enough. We want you to know that you come from a long line of survivors. Your ancestors, our ancestors, faced the end of everything and chose to fight. We crossed the galaxy. We preserved our culture. We gave life to dozens of species by teaching them about writing and knowledge. And when we could not survive ourselves, we made sure that you could. You are our legacy, but you are not bound by our failures. You are free to build whatever future you choose. Just remember where you came from. Remember that the language you speak, the writing you use, the culture you inherited, all of these things traveled across time and space to reach you. They are gifts from people who loved you before you were born. Do not let those gifts be forgotten. Teach your children to read and write. Preserve your stories. Reach for the stars. And when you look up at the night sky, know that somewhere among those stars our bones lie on distant worlds waiting. We are part of the galaxy now, mixed with its soil, feeding its plants, forever part of the cosmos we tried to explore. That is our resting place, and we are content. Live well, dream big, and finish the journey we began. The letter was signed by Junho and dated 7,000 years ago. The team stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Talon spoke. They succeeded. Against all odds, against time itself, they succeeded. Humanity returned. Hyun began making arrangements to transport the vault's contents back to Earth.